If you've ever wondered about the MP7 ever since Half-Life 2, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like, comment. Guys, welcome to Gunmag Warehouse. I am Mike. I run the YouTube channel Garand Thumb. If you're not familiar with either of us, that's totally fine. Just make sure that you enjoy this. So today we are going to be talking about the H&K MP7. What an interesting PDW, personal defense weapon. So let's talk about it for a second here. The H&K MP7 is a short-stroke gas piston system, very similar to the G36 and the H&K M416. Around the 90s, H&K kind of went away from the roller-delayed blowback guns, and they started getting into the short-stroke gas piston. They really have kind of got it nailed down and dialed in, which is why they've kind of moved over to it. The MP7 fires a 4.6 by 30 millimeter round. It's quite small, and it was made to be able to defeat body armor. So what was going on is that NATO had a requirement for a PDW, and you pretty much had a proliferation of high quality body armor around the late 80s, 90s, around that time. So because of that, any firearm firing a pistol caliber round was kind of at a disadvantage because they weren't able to defeat this armor with the projectiles that they had at the time. So you came out with a couple different ideas on how to do that. You had the FN P90 with the 5.7 round, and then you had the MP7 with the 4.6. Now, NATO in all their wisdom had both these designs submitted to them, and they didn't pick either. However, both designs have lived on, the P90 and the MP7, and you've seen the MP7 in use by very special operations groups, both the KSK and the Navy SEALs and others, so it is definitely used. So let's talk about the MP7 and what makes it kind of good, what makes it maybe not so good, and kind of talk about my experiences shooting it. Now, I've only fired around 1,200 rounds to the MP7, so not a whole lot, enough to kind of get a grasp on kind of what I think about it and how it shoots. So do understand my limitations when it comes to the MP7, but I do think I have enough to say with some authority and talk a little bit about it, at least a little bit more than just firing at some steel for about 300 rounds and saying this is a great gun. So first off, when it comes to the MP7, like any HK gun, it is completely and utterly over-engineered in every single way, which is good and bad in many ways, but H&K makes some great firearms. They just usually fill a small role that many people don't understand. So let's kind of figure out where the MP7 lies. So first off, the MP7 uses a short-stroke gas piston system, and a lot of people will look at the MP7, lots of polymer, very small little gun, they'll think flimsy, it's going to fall apart, I'm going to break this thing in half, it's probably not very reliable, I'll probably like flex on this thing and just rip it in half. That's not the case. The short-stroke gas piston is ultra reliable on the MP7. It is a very reliable design. They have really perfected that particular operating system. So the MP7 just chews through dirt and goes through debris, and all my time firing it, I only had one malfunction, and that one malfunction was from the malfunction stick that Daniel Shaw placed into the ejection port of the weapon. So not even due to the weapon itself, just because Daniel Shaw hates me.
We'll stop its clearance.
The one problem that you run into with the MP7 is that the MP7 is made to be taken down. It's made to be maintained on kind of a user level, kind of for the very basics. Now, if you need to get in and actually do work on the gas piston system, the gas system, unlike the G36 or the 416, that's pretty hard to do. It needs to be kind of given to an armorer. There are certain tools that need to be used to take it down. So when I was talking with James Williamson, I know I keep going back to him on HK guns, but he kind of is the HK guru around here. So James Williamson works for Zenith, but he's also kind of the expert on all things HK. He's an HK armorer for literally every HK gun you can think of. And talking to him, he ran into a lot of MP7s that were having trouble because guys would fire tens of thousands of rounds through them, and they wouldn't clean out the gas system and do the armor level maintenance that's required. So that could be an issue if you're running an MP7, you have an SOT or whatever, and you don't have the knowledge or wherewithal to be able to do that kind of armor level servicing. So do be aware of that. The MP7, like many other HK guns, is very ergonomic. So especially in the late 90s when they started kind of coming out with a lot of these different firearms like the 416 and the G36, especially the MP7, everything is pretty much where I want it. So if you look at the kind of design of the MP7, you notice that the trigger guard is very kind of USP P2000 like, and you could you could see where its genetics kind of came from. So the trigger guard is very large. It allows for a gloved finger to get in there very easily, to use it in cold environments. Makes sense based on where it was designed. And also the trigger guard is flared. That way with the magazine release, you're not going to accidentally release that magazine at the worst possible time. So it is different from like an AR-15 where it's a button. You have a little lever that press down and it releases the magazine. The bolt release is right above the trigger guard. You can hit it with a finger. What I found myself doing is running it very much so like an AR-15. So when I did my reload, and again, the MP7 does fire from a closed bolt. So when you go to bolt lock, I would drop the magazine, at the same time while simultaneously grabbing a new magazine. Hand finds hand because the MP7 has the magazine in the grip itself. Slam that thing in. As I'm slamming it in, just ride your thumb straight up and hit that bolt release and back up. Now I know some people like to get it up and as they're reaching up they release the bolt with their finger. That works as well. You can obviously rock the charging handle if you want to, but why not use the bolt release? It's a much more kind of ergonomic way to do it. The Selector Switch is what I really like about the MP7. And just like the G36, it's a far better design in my opinion than what we currently have on the M4, M16 family of rifles, where if you need to go from semi or safe to semi to full auto, it is very difficult. There's a 180-degree rotation compared to the MP7, which is approximately like a little less than 70-degree rotation. You have like a 30 to 40-degree throw to semi, and then another 30 to 40-degree throw all the way to full auto. So bringing that gun to full auto, absolutely easy to do, and it's very intuitive, so no problems when it comes to that. The straight pistol grip on the MP7, I personally find very comfortable. I know a lot of people have compared it to an Uzi, and they're like, wow, it's very uncomfortable. And when it comes to the Uzi, there are a couple problems with the general ergonomics of the Uzi that the MP7 lacks, but I can understand where you're coming from. But I found in practice that the MP7 is far more easy to drive between targets, use in unconventional positions than the Uzi ever was. And coming along with the ergonomics is trigger. What is a trigger like? Guns like the Uzi have terrible triggers. The MP5, really not great triggers in my opinion. The MP7 has a really nice trigger. So it has a very Glock-like safety on it, and that's just one of the many safeties that you can see. Most of the safeties are actually internal to the MP7. Again, the MP7 is massively, massively over-engineered. So the Glock safety, for those of you who fired Glocks, that's pretty much all of us, it's very intuitive when you're pulling the trigger on that. It's a very light, very crisp trigger pull, and it's just about what you want for a military gun. Rocking that thing in full auto, very easy. Running that thing on semi, not as fast as like an M4 AR-15 with like a nice trigger, but still quite nice. What's nice about the trigger also is the trigger mechanism itself. Some triggers are kind of over-designed, and that can lead to problems when you get dirt, dust, and sand in them. The H&K MP7 has a very simple, very robust trigger design. It's a very interesting one, and if you really want to learn more about it, I'd really recommend going to the H&K Pro forums and reading up a little bit. But suffice to say, because of the simple design, it's a very reliable design. That goes along with the short stroke gas piston. All those things are kind of coming together to make for a very compact, very reliable weapon system. So there's a couple different magazines. The H&K MP7 ran a 20 rounder for the most part. The MP7A1, which is the MP7 that I was running, ran a 40 rounder. That's what I preferred. The 40 round magazine is about the same size as your MP5 30 round magazine, just to kind of give you a sense of comparison. The 20 rounders are very small and they fit flush. So if you have to like conceal carry the weapon in some form or fashion, or need to get low to the ground, the 20 rounder definitely has kind of its place. Same thing with the 30 rounder, which is definitely shorter as well. And the reason they kind of designed the 40 rounder instead of the 30 rounder and all that kind of stuff is it came down to kind of ammunition and the different types of ammunition that were being produced at the time, where certain ammunition types fed better from a 30 round magazine. That was of course later corrected, but you still have the 30 rounders out there. If you look to the front of the weapon, you'll see that you have a folding front grip. So on the A1, which is the model I shot, it had the folding front grip. On the A2 model, that folding front grip is removed and replaced with a Picatinny section, much like what you'd see on a modern firearm. Now for me, both worked. I found the folding front grip to be perfectly fine. It put me in a really, really nice kind of neutral, thumb over bore grip on it, especially for such a short gun. You don't want something like an angled grip that would be very awkward for your hand. So that nice vertical grip works very well for the MP7A1, and I think really contributes to the overall, how do you say it? The overall kind of ergonomics, the overall shootability of the weapon over certain other PDW type designs like the P90 or the Uzi. The barrel, extremely accurate. A lot of people look at these smaller guns and they're like, okay, clearly this thing is just not accurate at all. The barrel's cold hammer forged, far more accurate than me. Again, the ammunition was designed to pierce body armor at 200 meters, so the gun can do it. Is it recommended? We'll talk about that in a second, but I've made around 120-yard shots with the MP7, so it definitely works. Just understand the limitations of the weapon, because you are firing a 4.6 by 30 millimeter round. That is a very small round. Now, however, you need to understand the mission set of the MP7. The MP7 was made as a burst fire weapon. The 4.6 millimeter round is very low recoil. You can easily put bursts into people. So talking with my friends who have run in certain groups in the military, that was what they told me. Typically bursts are used to put people into the ground with the MP7, where you rely on a volume of fire. Not to say that the 4.6 round is anemic in any way, but rather to point out that it's a small round and shot placement absolutely critically matters for that particular round. So when you're firing in bursts in close quarters, that's where the MP7 really shines. If you're trying to use this gun at distance, trying to fire it, 300-400 meters like out in the mountains of Afghanistan, that's probably not going to be the best place for it. But for a close quarter weapon, absolutely. And that kind of harkens to the polymer design as well, which lends itself to working better in maritime environments where it's less likely to rust and all that kind of stuff. And also it's much lighter. As far as what it's like to shoot the MP7, here comes my buzzword, recoil impulse and all that type of stuff. The MP7 to date is my favorite firearm that I've ever shot. I just absolutely love the MP7. It is reliable, it is a compact package, and when you fire that thing on full auto, you can easily keep an entire magazine in a very, very small grouping on somebody, because it just lends itself to that. It's just easy to use, easy to fire, very reliable. It's just something that I think everybody should have the chance to shoot. The recoil impulse is very smooth, very easy to keep something on target. Again, the weapon's not driving left, right, down, forward, anything like that. The recoil is straight back in your shoulder. What little recoil there is, it is an absolute pleasure to shoot. And also on top of that, 4.6 by 30 millimeter ammunition is quite cheap, so it's not that expensive to get. Probably comes down to a supply and demand. There's a lot of supply and not so much demand, because not a lot of people own an MP7, which is a damn shame. So we've talked about a lot of the pros when it comes to the MP7. Let's talk a little bit about the cons. So when it comes to the cons, the stock. The stock leaves a little bit to be desired, and that comes down to trying to be a very compact weapon system, because when you pull that thing out, you just have a little wire to kind of put your cheek against. So a good cheek weld can be a little bit kind of tough at times. So that is a problem. On the A1, some of the older butt stocks, it was a one-position pullout. That was a problem. KSK kind of inspired a multi-system where you could adjust the length of pull, very similar to what you see in M4s today. So that's kind of been eliminated. On top of that, compared to like an MP5, where the forks of the stock ran on the outside of the weapon, the forks in the MP7 run on the inside of the weapon. Pretty cool design as far as punching it in, getting it nice and compact when it's up against your body or something like that. It's not going to get caught up on gear or anything, or any of that stuff. So good on them for that. Again, cons, it doesn't fit certain applications, right? The MP7 is not a 200 meter plus gun. It's a very CQC centered firearm. So understand that when you're getting your hands on one, or when you're shooting one, to understand where it's coming from. Firing the thing in single shot definitely works. Certain British police forces use it in single shot, but this is definitely a burst fire gun, meant to be fired full auto in short bursts or longer bursts to be effective. Other cons with the MP7, it needs to be less cool looking, needs to be less cool in general, and it doesn't come with a crowbar automatically with it, which honestly it really should. Guys, honestly, this is the coolest firearm that I've ever shot. I wish that we could own this easier. I really do. It's unfortunate the firearm laws are the way they are, and we can't get our hands on an MP7 very easily without having an SOT or something like that, or being law enforcement or military. That's the way it is, unfortunately. If you get a chance to shoot an MP7, highly recommended that you do it. If you get a chance to own one, if you have an SOT, highly recommended. The MP7 to date is my favorite firearm I've ever fired. Get out there and shoot with it. Guys, thank you for watching. Stay tuned. Way more great things coming with GunMag Warehouse. Love you guys.